Hello everyone, welcome. This is week 10 of term 3. We had some issues with WebEx, so I'm recording this session just as a backup and hopefully this works. Hello, thank you for being here. This week we are starting a new assignment and trying not to give any hints away. I want you doing a bit of thinking to yourself. So, first off the bat, what do you see? What do these images have in common? So what do you see? What do they have in common? All right. Chuckles aside, what do you see? What do these have in common? I'll give you a little bit of thinking time. So have a look at each image. What do we see? There's certainly an older person. There's a couple of almost city shots, a couple with people in them. What do we see? We obviously have an older lady here. She's Japanese. We have what looks like the sprawling city beneath her, but it doesn't look very guided or structured. Reminds me of I've seen this somewhere. I think in like Fast and Furious 5. I want to say this is maybe Brazil. We also have up in the top there. I'm not sure if you know your city landscapes, but that is New York. New York, New York. Hey, I'm walking here. I'm walking here. Below that, we have what looks like a young boy who is reclining in a room or a landscape of just rubbish and refuse there, or perhaps recycling, collecting. It looks like some of that is bundled up. And on the far right side, we have quite a large population. It looks like it was potentially somewhere in Africa. So, what could these potentially have in common? Well, good question, and I'm glad you asked. Stop it. Now, I had to record this strangely with PowerPoint's a whole bunch of blanks because I didn't want to give away the answer, but now I do. We are looking, my friends, at megacities. So we're going to be looking into over our 6 weeks, our block. We are looking into megacities and how there can be informal settlements and how this impacts on people. So let's get into it. I want to make this a quick one for you today. I've got a PowerPoint, I've got the assignment sheet, and I've got the work leading into this as well. So have a watch of this, and then it's ready for you to do. So population blasting through. Population is defined as being the total number of human inhabitants in a particular area, such as a city, a country, or a continent at any given time. Usually we say per capita, comes from Old Latin, which is like head, per capita, so head. That can be one of the measurements. You can have per kilometer squared as one of your measurements of how dense a city is or how dense a place is. Cities will be really, really dense, lots of people in a square area. A rural area, you'll have way less people. So think of Australia, for example. You'll have, in a given city, per square kilometer, maybe 1,000 people, right? Let's say, in a city block or a couple of city blocks. Um, Whereas, out in the city, you'll be lucky to have two, for example. So, big differences in where you live. Now, moving on, megacities are characterized by having over 10 million people. Now, this is cities are a relatively new thing in human society and human history. They haven't always been there, so they're almost a bit of an experiment in a way, and they're becoming the main way that we live, which is interesting. So in 1950 we had one or maybe two, New York City and potentially Tokyo, and as early back as 2010 and now we have pushing 30 megacities. So population is booming in a lot of places around the world, and you might notice a certain pattern somewhat to where these are appearing, as you can see through the graphs here. We have obviously LA, we've got Mexico City, New York, we've got Sao Paulo, we've got Buenos Aires, we've got Paris, Moscow, Istanbul, Cairo, we've got Tokyo really showing up there. I'll give you one little anecdote. When I went to Tokyo a couple of years ago, it was amazing. I went to the top of a skyscraper called, I think, the Sky Deck or Sky Tower, and it was nighttime, and all of the lights are on across the city. And I looked, it's a round panoramic window. I had a look around. The lights went to the horizon in every single direction. Tokyo had actually merged and subsumed two other cities. So it had just grown and sprawled. It's huge, absolutely huge. So that gives you an indication of what we're working with here. In terms of population pressure, so the sum of factors like excessive food consumption or an increase in numbers within a population, that reduces the ability of the environment around it to support, which makes sense. You're taking more, there's less there, right? So this tends to result in what we would call migration and expansion over a range, or even in some cases, this is very rare, extinction or decline of a population. Now, this is more so in animals. Humans are very interesting because we can manipulate the environment. We don't fit the two classic breeding types of biology. We can actually suit the environment, make the environment suit us and our patterns. So very, very, very strange sort of population pressures for us. So why are they growing so rapidly? Well, beginning of the 20th century, there were 11 cities with a population of over 1 million people. Now there are more than 400 cities with more than 1 million people. But I don't think Adelaide's going anywhere soon. We've got about 1.1 or 2, I believe. And there's forecasts saying Melbourne and Sydney will go up to 7 million and 8 million, that sort of thing. Adelaide's just forecast for like 1.4 or 5 or something small by 2050. It's really small, which is good. For our standard of living, it probably works. There are natural increases. There is moves from rural to urban migration and also urban to urban. You might have heard of people moving to, say, Sydney to go and get a job, or people moving from the country to come to the city to look for work or to look for education, whatever it might be. Very common from where I used to live to send graduating kids over to Adelaide to board and then get an education in Adelaide and maybe come back to the country after. But it was a thing, the migration population movement, man. So we have two things. You might have heard of these before. We have push factors and we have pull factors. Now, push factors are conditions which force people to leave their homes and migrate. Pull factors are the things that pull them somewhere. They attract people to a certain area. So what would push you out of your home currently? What would pull you somewhere else? Think of it that way. If there was a war breaking out, for example, you'd be pushed out of your home and you might look for somewhere really safe and has good education and maybe jobs and just safety. And you'd maybe be pulled towards, I don't know, New Zealand. Let's go invade New Zealand. Why not? Beautiful country. So if we have a think about some of these, I want you thinking to yourself, because we don't have the lesson time to, I want you to sort these as I say them. Is this going to be a push factor or a pull factor? Or if my webcam is backwards, a push factor or a pull factor? I can't tell. We have these. So war, is that going to be a push factor or a pull factor? Is that going to push someone out of their home, or is that going to attract someone to live in a war zone? I think it's a pretty obvious answer. It's a definite push. We have better job opportunities. Better job opportunities. Is that going to be pushing someone away, or is it going to be pulling someone in? If there's a better job somewhere, you can better believe a lot of people are going to move for that. So very much we have a lot of movement based around job opportunities. So yeah, it's a pull factor for sure. We have unemployment. If there's huge unemployment in the area, it's just not going to work. Is that a push or a pull? Again, most likely pushing you. I don't know why you'd want to move somewhere with unemployment. It's not ideal. Insecurity, and that can be around safety, terrorism happening, war happening, conflict, political insecurity. It can be a lot of things. So insecurity is probably going to push you out. Correct. We have religious freedom. If you are maybe being targeted in your home country, you might be Christian, you might be Muslim, you might be Buddhist, you might be of another persuasion, and you're being targeted somewhere else that practices freedom of religion. That's a big attraction. Yeah, that's a lot of a person's core identity. Fertile land, a land that just grows really well. If you've been living somewhere that is not growing, there's maybe famine as a result coming up next. You're probably going to be pretty attracted to moving somewhere with pretty fertile land. We have famine and drought, of course, pushing people away. When there's famine, there is no food. When there's drought, there is no water. Very hard to make a living and eke out a living when you are struggling to grow your own food, let alone buy other food. Scarcity of land is another one. If land is taken up, especially in some of these island nations or island cities that are happening, island states, there's only limited space. There's not room for expansion. Australia, we could move more and more into the desert. It'll just get hotter and hotter as the years go. But there is not so much a scarcity of land here. maybe coastal land, or if you want to live at Glenelg or Henley, yeah, for sure, scarcity. If you want to move further and further away from the city, yeah, it works. For some places, that doesn't work. So would that be a push or a pull factor? It's going to push you out if there's not much land. Political freedom, if you believe in a certain way of government, or ruling, or a way of life, a certain vision, you might have more capitalist tendencies, or a liberal sort of, a worldview. And I use that not in the terms of Australian politics, but just, being very free or whatever it might be. But if you live in a country that has an oppressive government, whether that's a bit of a dictatorship, you have, one person rah, telling you everything, whether you might be in a one party kind of state, like say China, where they even give you like a social ranking. These sorts of things can be very not freeing. I don't know how to put it. You don't get that sense of freedom. So maybe that is appealing. And lastly, we have education opportunities. Education is huge. Australia has a whole industry built around education. It is a pull factor for a lot of people to come here, get their education, and head back to their country, and have the prestige of having studied in Australia. So education is huge, really, really big. People want a better education for their kids. They want their kids to do better than they did. So it's a big pull factor for sure. There are a range of views on population growth, like the world's population is growing too fast. Developing countries are poor because they're overpopulated. It's the availability of resource that matters. The people who have a lot of children is because they're poor. Our environment doesn't have the capacity to cope with increasing population. No one has the right to tell anyone how many children they can or can't have. There needs to be stringent forms of population control. People are intelligent, and we will always find innovations to cope with these increases. And all of them have merit. All of them have a bit of a basis in some sort of logic. So there are lots of thoughts around our population growth, and wondering how you feel about, the world population moving up. I think we're destined in 2050, if I look it up very quickly. So 2050 population, we are looking at, no, it looks like my new keyboard did not work there. So 2050 world population, we're looking at 9.7 billion. So we're going to hit basically about 10 billion in 2050. That's the projection. That's if nothing comes along and interrupts that. But it's looking like a lot. And I've heard previously that the world can safely accommodate 7 billion, which we're kind of at about now, maybe 8. So we're kind of really pushing the boundaries here. There needs to be big increases in agricultural technology for us to keep up, and investing in other developing countries, helping them get on the level to be better at their own agriculture. So, what role does the following play in world population? We have increased standards of living, we have better education, better understanding of nutrition, we have advances in medical science, public health, like having a doctor or a clinic or nurses or midwives available, decline in infant mortality, and we have a lowering of fertility as well. So, all of these will in some way impact on, do we have more growth in a country or a continent or a place, or do we have, a lower number? So the more and more we have of these, there is actually a pattern that says the more nutrition, the better the healthcare, maybe the more income or education, the less children people have. If we look at somewhere like, if we look at, say, Nigeria, or a country somewhere in the southern Saharan African belt, an average family number might be having 5 point something kids. Now, you compare that to here in Australia, where we have like maybe 1.5, maybe 2 kids, maybe on average. And it is shown that when we are having more nutrition, kids are surviving through childhood in these conditions because of the nutrition, because of education, because they have access to clean water and education and all these things, right? When that happens, it's shown that these numbers drop. That because kids aren't dying, they don't have as many kids to compensate for. Well, if my little Timmy passes away, a lot of kids, infant mortality is huge in some areas of the world, very sadly. If little Timmy doesn't make it, then I have a few other kids that can still continue on and help me and work on whatever we do as our family income. So when that happens, yeah, there's huge increases. So ways that we look at this. This is a population pyramid. This gives us a very clear picture of what exactly the population currently looks like. If we look at Australia in 1955, this is the left side graph here. This is a population pyramid. It's called that because it kind of resembles a pyramid. The blue is your male. The pink is your female. Now, what you have up the y-axis, y to the sky, you have your years. So this is age. So 0 to 4 is our bottom. 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19. All the way up, we go to 55 to 59. We go up to 80 plus. So these are some measurements there, right? It looks like they didn't take census data for anything above 80 back in the day, for whatever reason. Now, what we can see here is that this is the percentage of the entire population. So we've got the bottom bar here, the X, which is saying from 0%, it moves to that way and to that way. How much of the entire population is this age and this gender? So we have over here from 0 to 4 in 1955 in Australia, we had 5.5% of Australians being male between the ages of 0 to 4. Okay. We had 3.6% being 35 to 39. If we look at female, for example, if we look at the 0 to 4 age bracket, we can see that there was 5.3%. So it's actually slightly smaller. There's a few more boys. If we look at the 30 to 34, we had 3.8%. So overall, you get this 100% picture that shows us this is the makeup of the population. And we can see a trend when we look at another year. Now, this is a projection for 2020 on the other side. So have a look at the difference here. If we look on the left side here, we would say that this is probably a bit of a youthful or aged population, a youthful or aging, pardon me. So you've actually got a bit of a chunk sticking out here at the young part. So it's a little bit youthful. You actually have the bigger bulk of your size here and a trend showing on this side when we look at the aging. So they're getting older. They're not aged, they're not elderly yet. But there is that note. If we look at 2020, this is what's happening roughly now. These are some projections as to where we're headed. So you can see here already they're tipping into above the 80 on the census data. And what we have here is a shrinking in youth. We're no longer at 5.5% for male, we're now at 3.4. So it looks like, as a rough trend, we're having less younger children, which means that we are an aging population. So this actually means that we're not growing in terms of numbers. You know, we had 9 million back in the day, we have 25 now. Only a few years ago we had a few more million, a few less million, but we're not rapidly increasing our population. We're kind of stagnant, maybe dropping a little bit. So over, the next 100 years, that number wouldn't change hugely, I'd imagine. So that's one of those things that we can use to measure and get a really good picture of what this population of this country looks like. Now, we can talk about the lowering of fertility rates. This is how people have kids, but that can be education for everybody. That can be better food and healthcare, family planning information, government programs, equality for women, getting them out of the home and actually working and producing. This can open up huge possibilities, get them into the workforce. It means that they're less likely to have children earlier, maybe delayed, or maybe not at all. So it's one of those things that can actually reduce that number as well, is actually educating girls and getting them into the workforce after. There's a really great doco I'd recommend to you guys. I cannot remember what it's called right now, but it's great. It's girls around the world and the issues. It's really fantastic. So these are some ways that we would describe the population pyramids. We could have a high birth rate. We could have, expanding. It could be stationary. It could be contracting. We also have here a couple of different examples. I won't waffle through. We could look at Singapore as a sustainable city, and we'll talk about that more as we go. The other thing here is that we have the world if it was a village of 100 people. Now I want you to think about this, and then we're going into the assignment. So if the world was a village of 100 people, you would have this many people around the world, right? So let's get into this. 51 people in our village would be male, 49 would be female. 80 people in our village would be living in substandard housing. So 80 out of 100 would be in substandard housing. 33 people in the village would be able to read. So 1/3 of our village, of our world, could read. 50 will be malnourished. One will be dying of starvation. Malnourished, obviously, then not getting enough nutrition. 67 people in the village will have access to safe water and safe water supplies. 76 people will have access to electricity, so three-quarters will have electricity in some fashion, whether it's a huge. Of the 76 people that do have electricity, most only use it for lighting at night. So I guess maybe for cooking or for doing those last-minute things. 7 people will have access to the internet. 7. 1 person will have attended university. 2 will be infants. 1 person will be elderly. 5 people in the village will control 32% of the world or village's wealth. All 5 of them will be American citizens. 33% people in the village will live on or attempt to live on 3% of the village's income. So a third of that whole population living on a very, very tiny percent. So it's estimated every year there's 85 million people added to the world's population. Obviously, the two right now that have the largest will be China and India. We're expected to reach over 9 billion by 2054 or 2050, somewhere around there. The average age of the world's population at the start of 2000 was 25. That was the average. And whether that drops lower because of the increasing rate of birth in some countries, who knows? There has been a decline in world fertility and a decline in mortality. We have better healthcare, more food, so people are dying later and less often. So we're actually keeping our oldies and we are getting more youngins. So in that way, we're really pushing those numbers up as well. So what are the impacts of a global increase in population? There are some things that make you go, oh, you want to watch Black Mirror or one of those dystopian sort of things. We have, to suit the increase in population, we have deforestation. We have a depletion of ocean resources like fishing. We have things like depletion of productive farming land, a rise in infectious diseases. We have food shortages. We have All right, sorry for the interruption. Had a little phone call. Now, things like food shortages, things like increased problems with waste, which can then go to sea, can be, creating greenhouse gases. We have overcrowded cities. There's pressure on water supplies. There's social unrest, things like politics and things like people wanting to have their views heard. Things like global warming and sea level rise. Depletion of productive farming land for use in, mining and use in other things, where it could be used for, it's used for housing, where it could be used for farming. There's a lot of urban sprawl happening in Melbourne, for example, where they're going into, farmland around, which is reducing our capacity. There's only so many areas of Australia that we can really grow our food properly. So the challenges for our cities would be in the future ensuring adequate food supplies, developing your own gardens to grow fresh fruit and veggies in your own areas. I know I like growing my little herbs and veggies. Encourage efficient and cleaner use of fossil fuels, and then transitioning also into renewables as well. So there's no sudden shift, doesn't really happen. Developing energy sources that are renewable. Producing adequate sanitation facilities, so greater access to flushing toilets and efficient sewage. This is a real thing for a lot of places around the world. Reducing solid and hazardous waste through recycling, and just using less stuff as well. Allow people at the local level to contribute their ideas for cities, provide adequate shelter. We can use technology to make new building materials, make use of solar energy. There's now a concrete 3D printer that 3D prints a house in like 3 days, an entire house out of concrete. Crazy. Reducing air pollution by changing maybe to natural gas, clean coal. Clean coal isn't really, you can filter it. There's no such thing as like clean coal. All right, we'll put it that way. Providing better access to quality freshwater supplies, improving the quality of wastewater to be reused, controlling urban sprawl, making sure we don't spread into that really nice farmland, reuse vacant land and buildings in the inner city and housing density in the suburbs, and improve planning as well. So we have quite a few of the biggest cities here. These are our mega cities. We have Beijing, China. The numbers might be a bit off. They might be slightly old at this stage, but let's say 12 million. These are perhaps some older numbers, and my keyboard is working in. There we go. Okay. 19th, we have Rio de Janeiro at about 12 million. Dhaka, Bangladesh. We have Buenos Aires in Argentina. We have Moscow, Russia. We have Karachi in Pakistan with 14. We have Manila in the Philippines at 14.8. So a very cool story, and I'll share it with you guys during the term about kids living in the cemetery. I'll tell you about it. It's really cool. Cairo with 15. We have Kolkata in India with 15. Osaka, Japan with 16.8. This is where we're connecting to Tokyo as well. Jakarta, Indonesia with 17. We have Shanghai, China. We have Los Angeles with 18. We have Delhi in India with 19.5. Mumbai at about almost just under 20. Sao Paulo, Brazil with 20 million. We have New York in at 22. We have Mexico City with 22 and a half. Seoul with 25 million. And at first place, we have Tokyo with 34 million inhabitants. So huge numbers there. Now, that's all just some thinking leading us into this assignment. Shall we have a look at that? Let's do that. So, okay, we're back into it. So this is your assignment sheet. We are looking into investigating the concept of sustainable communities in megacities by researching the components that make up a sustainable community and examining informal communities. What does that mean? That means essentially you're looking at, is this place around the world sustainable? Can it be kept going at a healthy level? That's what sustainability kind of is. Can it keep going? If we burn everything up, if you were doing a sprint, imagine you're sprinting, if you've never heard of sustainability, imagine you're sprinting in a race and it's a marathon. It's actually like a 8K marathon, whatever, 5K. I don't know. I'm not a runner. You're sprinting the entire time. You're burning up all of your energy very quickly. You might get a couple of 100 meters. That is not sustainable. What is sustainable is keeping a soft pace, maybe the occasional burst of speed, but keeping a pretty, a bit of a jog. It's a consistent sort of speed. That is sustainable. In the same way, we can have places around the world, and the use of energy is, sustainability gets thrown around a lot for energy. We can have places around the world that aren't sustainable. Maybe they don't treat people very nicely. Maybe they don't have good access to resources like sanitation or water, or maybe they don't have access to food easily or public transport. Something about them might not be as sustainable as they could be. So this is where you come in, and we're going to be looking at informal settlements, otherwise known as slums, and in some places in Brazil, known as the favelas. So, sustainable communities are places where people want to work and live now and in the future. They meet the diverse needs of existing and future residents, are sensitive to their environment, and contribute to a high quality of life. That's very important, the quality of life. They are safe and inclusive, well planned, built and run, and offer equality of opportunity and good services for all. So, here are the steps to what you'll be doing. You'll be choosing a city known for its informal settlements. That's number one. Things like slums and favelas. I want you to think of that. A favela is a Brazilian slum. That's, for whatever reason, is their community name. So now this assignment was built around the idea of Sao Paulo in Brazil. However, I'm going to give you some other options. So if you don't want to do Sao Paulo, you have other options, okay? But the sources I've given you are based around that. So you then undertake some background research into the city. So the location, population data, informal settlements, so the slums that are there. You might want to look at places like Dharavi in Mumbai, Khayelitsha in Cape Town, South Africa, Kibera in Nairobi, Kenya, maybe Ciudad Neza in Mexico City, or Orangi Town in Karachi, Pakistan. These are 5 of the biggest slums in the world that I've given you. You might want to look just at other cities, whatever works. Number 3 is to explore several media sites. So I want you to get a better understanding of this. So you might go to YouTube. For Sao Paulo, there's this great link here. It might have issues with Flash. If it does, try to use a different browser or a different computer. See how you go. It might be Internet Explorer works, or Chrome probably won't work, but Firefox might, Opera might. See how you go. Number 4, identify the environmental, the social, and the economic challenges people face living in these settlements. If you're not sure what they are, that's where you need to do some searching. The environment is obviously the environment, okay? Social, how do the people cope? Are there jobs? Are there those sorts of things? Well, standard of living. And then economic is, things like is there a bit of a economy there? Do they have businesses? Do they have opportunity? Are there jobs? This is what we call a triple bottom line. This is a big thing in geography, triple bottom line. Basically, it's when you have this problem and solutions you look at, what is the triple bottom line? How does this impact the environment, people, and the economy? And if it's all good for all three, you get a pretty good solution. Not bad. So that's what you're looking at, the triple bottom line here of environment, social, and economic challenges. Number 5, investigate and identify the components of a sustainable community. All right, investigate and identify them. So I want you familiar with these. I've actually put it into the document for you. It wasn't there before. So it is here for you. Okay, you have 8 to choose from, or yes, 8. And these are the things that basically will help determine if this is a sustainable community. If you have all 8 of those, you're doing pretty good. Evaluate and choose 5 that you think are the most important for the sustainability of your informal settlement. So choose 5 for yours. You might decide that governance, transport, economy, environment, and social and cultural are the 5 that you want to look into for yours. You're choosing 5 out of those 8. You can look at other places, but that was the diagram I've run with. Analyze and evaluate the sustainability of this settlement. How sustainable is it? Is it going to continue? Are people going to be able to live, economically, socially, or environmentally? Is the environment friendly to them? Are they burning through the environment? Are they, digging up trees just to have stuff to build and make fire? And I don't know. Is this being sustainable? Then make a recommendation. Make recommendations that can be implemented to improve the sustainability. Now, throughout here, there's a few things you can be doing throughout the entire thing. You're probably wondering, how do I present this? And that's a great question. So let's go down here and have a look. I would love it if you could produce an informational website using Google Sites or another free site. But Google Site is decent. You can then share it with me and my email address. And that means that in your Google Drive and my Google Drive, it will show up. That means I can come in and check and still put comments and stuff like that. Your word count is 800 words for the body of this. If you decide this is too difficult to make a site, we can look into other things like a report, but I want to jazz it up a little bit. All right. The website should include the background info, a summary of the economic, environmental, social challenges, a summary of the benefits living there as well. What are some of the benefits of living in a slum or something like that? In some places, you would be very surprised. 5 components of sustainability that you have selected as the most important, an analysis of your settlement and its sustainability, shown in the films, for example, recommendations to improve that sustainability, and you can also include facts, figures, maps, images, diagrams. Whew, we're nearly there. I'm marking 3 things. I want to see that you have a knowledge and understanding of the social, built, economic characteristic of a slum. So I want to see that you really understand how these people are living and how they're challenged. I want to see that you, with AE2, analyze and evaluate your information to make recommendations. So show me you understand the place, make recommendations, and lastly, communicate clearly by using the right keywords and the right visual representations. Yeah? So show me you understand, show me you can recommend, show me that you can use the right words and images. Okay? I hope that makes sense. That's the assignment sheet. Oh man, how long can Mac talk for? He can talk for 34 minutes already. I want to show you your weekly work. Nope, that's not it. Here we go. Okay. So over in your Moodle, you do have some weekly work. It's not quite up there yet, but you have a week 10. I imagine this will be done during holidays. I am expecting you work during holidays a bit, but I am going to also understandably extend this into very early week 2. We only have 6 weeks of term in term 4, so we have 2 assignments to finish, meaning that we need to really get the pressure on. All right. Now, showing you this is your Google form to contribute to. This is week 10 megacities, population pyramids, and slums. I think you'll have a good grasp of it following this talk. I want you to understand what a megacity is, understand how we represent populations in the pyramids, population pyramids, describe a distribution. So there's some examples there to do, and describe the features of a slum. Now, this will take probably 60 minutes. There's about 30 minutes of video and an article to read. So I wanted to give you a heads up, find some time, okay? A couple of videos and working through these questions here. A few questions again. Section 2 on the slums and informal settlements and success criteria right at the end. Ticking the ones that apply. If you feel that you can do those well, tick them. If you feel like you can't, you need to leave it blank, and that means that I can come and have a chat with you about maybe strengthening that bit of knowledge. That's pretty much all I wanted to show you. So that is the intro to our assignment. I'm going to be emailing this out. This is probably on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching it there now. Hello to me in the future. Hey. And yeah, if you have any questions, please email. We are looking at a draft date of, I'm going to say week 2 Monday. It was the end of week 1. I'm going to extend it a little bit. All right, so week 2, I want you to have that ready to go. It should be done. If a website is not doable, I want you to think of what is doable and just go with that. All right, you need to get the work done. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. This is getting into the really, really interesting area here of, you know, people and the world and the real world. So thank you guys very much for listening in. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you do get stuck again, email, and good luck. Bye guys.